Hi, I'm Michael St.Clair. Today I'm here with Raymond Merriman. He's the Western world's foremost financial astrologer and market cycles analyst. And we're having a meeting together discussing all the issues that concern everyone on this planet. And I was given the opportunity to discuss a couple of issues. I wanted to ask him who he thinks will be the next president of the United States. I believe 7 billion people may be interested in this. And we wanted to discuss also how the Federal Reserve astrology might relate to the astrology of the United States of America of 1776. And I know that Ray Merriman has been saying that he feels that the time around 2020-21 may become a revival of what we lived through the 80s and the 90s. So, Ray, thank you very much for being here. So
You're welcome.
Who do you think will be the next president of
The next president of the United States. You put me on the spot there. Edward Snowden.
He will run from
If
Russia.
he gets nominated, he'll run. And if he gets nominated, he'd win. Well, seriously, though, I don't know the answer to that yet. We have to see who the candidates end up being. You know, we have several Republicans who have declared their candidacy, and the only chart I've really looked at is Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, who's a Democrat front runner, and they both have astrological aspects of what could become a president. So what we're looking at is a study by Michael Lorenz. Wait a minute, is it Michael Lorenz? Michael O'Reilly. He did a study on the position of Mars in the charts of U.S. presidents, Mars and the Sun.
Yes.
And he found that when Mars was in Leo was the most predominant position of U.S. presidents. And about the third or fourth was Mars in Virgo. So our last two presidents, George Bush and Barack Obama, had Mars in Virgo. But there was a surprise in 2008 because Hillary had the Mars in Leo. So she has that Mars in Leo, which is common in U.S. presidents. So I would say just at this point, she probably is a front runner. And as you look at it, you know, if you did a poll, she probably would have the most votes of the Americans right now. Whether she ends up running or not depends who, you know, her actual opponent is. But Jeb Bush's has the Sun in Aquarius, and I think that was the most common sun sign for a president, was Sun in Aquarius. And Mars in Leo is the most common Mars position, and that's Hillary. So they both got strong aspects of historical correlations of USA presidencies. So I would say it probably does come between those two, and which one wins, I'd have to actually look at the chart a little bit closer as we get to the election. And actually, we want to look at the formal, when they get formally approved by their conventions. What moment does that happen, and what is the chart of that, and how does it compare to the different charts? Then I'll make a final determination.
Yes, that's very interesting. He's saying that the moment they get actually officially nominated, that moment in astrology can tell us more about what would happen.
Yeah, and that'll be sometime, I think, in August of 2016. So we'll take that moment too, because if I'm looking just at their horoscopes and historical correlation, both those two seem to be front runners. But the difference might be the moment of time that they're actually nominated.
Yes, which will be different for Hillary or for Jeb.
Yeah, there'll be somewhere 2 to 3 weeks difference between them.
Yes. Thank you. So now, the other issue I have wanted to bring up is the following. You see, the United States of America, there are a couple of moments that are very interesting for the formation to look at what the astrology of the nation looks like, but it's mainly 1776. However, we also have the Federal Reserve chart, which is in December of 1913. And I have always been told by some legal and analytical and economic experts that it stands to reason that the Federal Reserve actually owns the United States, and that therefore one could infer, I mean this is theoretical, infer that the 1913 chart is actually more likely the astrological chart of America. What do you think about all this?
Well, they all tie in together. In the United States, we celebrate our birthday as July 4th. That's Independence Day.
Yep.
But the actual history of that date is when George Washington was delivered the vote from Congress to declare war.
Yes.
So that's when the war started. The actual vote for independence took place on July 2nd.
That's correct.
And it had to take place somewhere probably before noon, because it took 5 or 6 hours for the newspapers to come out, and it was announced in the newspapers that evening. So I tend to think that the United States has Libra rising, and that it was formed about 10 minutes before noon on July 2nd. And on that date, Venus had just moved into Cancer. Okay? Venus is 0 degrees of Cancer. If you waited 2 or 3 days later, it's maybe 3 days. It's 3 degrees of Cancer. I like the 0 Cancer for the Venus. Venus rules the currency,
yes,
the money, the banks, if you will, especially with Pluto. Well, in 1913, 2 things happened. It wasn't only the formation of the Federal Reserve Board, which was on December 23rd, 1913, when the Sun in Pluto, the Sun was in 1 degree Capricorn, Pluto was in 0 Cancer, right on the USA Venus, so the whole banking system changed. But Pluto also rules taxes, and that was the same year we started the income tax as a temporary measure to collect monies. So it's still, 100 years later, it's become stronger and stronger. And if you look at the meaning of Pluto, Pluto is also like weaponry, coercion. It's a way to extract something, power from other people. And I hate to say it, but it seems to me that in the United States, not the Federal Reserve, but the income tax has become a method of confiscating wealth from those who earn the money and then distributing it to whatever, to the political interests of those who support the political process. So I think both charts are very important. If you say that the United States is owned by the Federal Reserve, yes, you could say that because they control the money.
Yes.
And whoever controls the money has the power.
Yes.
And so Pluto is on the USA Venus, and it took over control of the money, whether it's the banking system or the individual's income. They've all been confiscated or subsumed, if you will, by the combination of the Federal Reserve Board and the government's income tax, which both came out in that same year.
Mm-hmm. Many economists who know that we're having this mushroom of a quadrillion, maybe 2 quadrillion of debt hanging over the planet, and some experts have asked me, well, where did this money go actually? And I said pretty blunt, well, a lot of it goes into black projects, by which I mean defense projects in aviation and spacecraft, secret space programs and stuff of that nature, which most people don't know about. But I find very interesting the correlation of the people's money and the extraction by the power.
Yeah.
And how this hangs together. What do you think, how do you feel it's going to continue for the United States during, say, the next few years now, after the moment when whoever is being elected the next president? So
well, let me say first of all that if the Federal Reserve Board really wanted to be loved by the people, they could easily get rid of the debt. They can just forgive it.
That would be smart.
That would be smart. That would be smart. It would put us back on a reset, and the bankers would not be villainized so much by the public or even by, the administration, which has come on record of calling the bankers the fat cats, which didn't help their popularity. So if you want to make a cooperation between the people, the government, and the banks do own the government, if you will, and they own the people, they own the country, the way for that to happen is for the banks to forgive the debt. Because really, they just created the debt themselves. They printed the money and then lent it to us at an interest, yeah. Right? So it's money they didn't earn, it's money they just created and tax us on and give us interest. So that's my solution to the debt. Forgive it. The banks just forgive it. And if in time they don't forgive it, and you're moving into a period where Pluto's in the middle of Capricorn now, and soon to go into Aquarius, I mean, those are the signs where people get more and more power. And if the people get the power over the banks, eventually they're going to remove those banks. So the banks, if they want their own survival, I would say in the next 20, 30 years, let's say by 2040, 2045, yes. It might be important for them to forgive these kinds of debts that they have created for the people.
Yes, in other words, they could creatively relinquish control and rebalance the entire situation.
And they could work in cooperation with the people.
That's right.
Instead of, you know, in a position of ownership and onerous control over the people. As far as where the United States, where I see it going, I do believe that in 2020, when the Saturn-Pluto comes together with Jupiter, and if you look back in history and see these kinds of things, Jupiter and Saturn together and Saturn and Pluto together, those are usually the times you have a swing of power, you know, go from liberal to conservative, back to liberal to conservative, but you get strong leaders. Strong leaders emerge at that time. It's not necessarily that they're elected for the first time in 2020, it may be their second term. But whoever becomes a president, was the first term or second term, they end up becoming strong leaders. If you look at, for instance, the last time we had that, which was the last perhaps really strong leader we had, and I would say it was Ronald Reagan, he wasn't popular at first. He became popular because he was elected out of the unpopularity of Jimmy Carter. But he had a rough first term. That's right. It was his second term where his legacy was established and his strength as a leader was established. When he commanded the Russians and Gorbachev to take down that wall, that was a turning point in his legacy. Up until then, he was besieged with conflicts too, with the Nicaragua, armed rebels types of things. Yeah. He had his share of problems. But when the communism, as we knew it at that point, came to an end, he got the credit for it, and he became recognized as a strong leader with a great legacy. And the one before that, the Saturn-Jupiter before that, was John F. Kennedy.
Yes, of course.
And he was probably, I would say Reagan and Kennedy in the last half of the 20th century were the most popular presidents in the United States. And the time before that would have been Franklin Roosevelt. Now, when Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn came together, it wasn't his first term, it began his third term.
Yes.
So, but he was the president at that point, and he became the strong leading figure. And so I think in the year 2020, whoever is elected president at that point, whether it's first term or not, becomes a strong leader. And if they can instill the confidence in their leadership of the people, that I think the confidence is a very important factor, just as Reagan gave it to us in the 1980s, to turn the economy around, to believe you can do it, and to start becoming creative in our production of our goods and the trades of our goods. I think that might help to the economic situation.
Yes, I see that as 2020 becomes 21, I believe the date is 21st of January 2021. That's a chart that I show in my little book.
Yes.
Which is actually the day or the day after when he gets sworn in.
Yes.
I see there astrologically a potential for something even visionary, because we're then moving into Aquarius, actually, which would mean the group of people, maybe even globally.
Yes.
So I'm always saying that I'm, for good reason, confident in an optimistic sense that we're going to see within the next 5 years a turn for better things. And you have been saying that in economics you would actually see an upswing that would remind us of the 1980s. Can you
well, yes, if you go back to the last 2 times, and really 6 of the last 7 times, I believe, within 2 years of Saturn conjunct Pluto, the economy kind of bottoms, and it begins a long growth process. We had Saturn Pluto conjunct in 1946-47.
Correct.
And, you know, the war ended in 45. And it took a couple years to develop, you know, the rebuilding of Asia, the rebuilding of Japan and in Europe. And typical of the United States throughout history, when we win a war, when we're victorious in warfare, we don't imprison the people, we don't enslave them, we don't destroy them. We try to rebuild them so they trade with us. All we want to do is trade. You know, we want to trade, and we don't want you trying to destroy us, and we won't destroy you. We want to develop you to trade with us. Well, that happened in the 1940s, and of course, Japan and Europe became very strong economies over the next 20 years, until the opposition of Saturn and Pluto, which was 1966. Stock markets topped then, economies peaked out then, and then we went to this slow, stagnant period until the conjunction from 1966 to 1982. Even in the first term of Reagan's presidency, it was not a strong economy.
Yes.
It was a difficult one. But the economy did bottom around within 2 years of 1982. You say 1980, 84, that was a bottoming process. And then we began another 20-year run until the early 2000s. I mean, some might say it peaked in 2000, some might say maybe 2006, 2007. Saturn Pluto came into opposition again in 2001.
2001 at 9/11.
Yeah, and some of the economy continued higher after that, but the major part of the economy peaked by 2001. That was the last surplus we had.
Yep.
And then we went into, you know, more excessive spending, and if you spend more than you make, you go into debt. And that continues until about 2020, give or take 2 years.
Yes.
So sometime around then, the commodity cycle will come back and peak out, but the economic cycle and the confidence cycle is at a low then, and then it begins to rebound.
I agree. 2022, I can see how we're going to come out of it. Not just for the United States. Actually, I can see that the whole picture looks better.
Probably.
And then, if I may ask one more question, you need to run for your plane. Thank you very much, by the way, for having made the time to do this meeting. In 2024 to 26, we have this Saturn Neptune conjunction,
right,
which I believe is going to be a very critical, crucial alignment for almost just about everything global because of how Saturn Neptune interact. Can you say a few more things?
Well, that's an important one because, as you mentioned earlier, there are certain time points and location points in the zodiac that we peg. And that Saturn Neptune is going to cross that 29 Pisces 0 Aries point, which is where the eclipse was in March of 2015, which is where Uranus was in 2010-2011 period. And so these are all connected. If you go back to 2010 when Uranus crossed that point, it's when the Greek default happened and had to be bailed out, which threatened the Euro Union. Yes. It's when the Federal Reserve Board surprised the world by not ending their quantitative easing, but ramping it up and going to QE2, which set the currency wars start. And here we are again in 2015, and we see the same things. Although the Federal Reserve Board has stopped the quantitative easing, it still has a zero interest rate policy, but all of the other countries, Japan, China, the ECB, they're all starting new quantitative easing programs.
Absolutely.
And I think we get to 2025 and the Saturn Neptune hits that 0 Aries point, you'll see the resolution of a lot of these things. Maybe the quantitative easing in the world finally ends by 2025. Maybe the Greek problem for the Euro Union, they finally get a resolution for it, and either Greek gets on its feet or it's out of the Union, and they figure a way to continue the Union. But this could muddle along these issues until 2025, where it's going to happen, it's not going to happen, or we're going to save them, we're not going to save them. We go back and forth on that till 2025. The other thing about Saturn and Neptune is interest rates. Right now, in the end of this year, 2015, through the fall of 2016, we're going to be under Saturn square Neptune. This is a 36-year cycle. And if you go back every 36 years, you'll see interest rates peaked or bottom. In 36 years ago, we had this in 1979, 1980. Interest rates, inflation were at a peak.
Yes.
Now we're at the bottom. Yeah. We have no interest rate, and we have almost disinflation or deflation. But you go back 36 years before 1980, you're in 1944. That too was a zero interest rate environment. there was very low interest rates and very low, the inflation cycle was pretty tame, but then it gradually goes up. And so I'm thinking that from this Saturn Neptune square, where zero interest rates, we're going to start, you know, slowly increasing. We'll probably go back and forth, but you'll start seeing efforts to increase it.
Yes.
But where it really takes off is probably after 2025.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, this makes sense. This is very interesting and important for everyone to understand how the cycles really mirror the situations globally and in all affairs. I even see it in technology, how we're going to break through to a completely new world of potentially new physics is going to come available for us. I know it exists, but the scientists don't yet know. New science, new medicine, alternative medicine, new, I say even time travel, because I'm into these things.
Yes.
So I see a breakthrough of a magnitude that we can't even yet imagine.
I like to describe it kind of like Antonia did earlier in the presentation. And you know, we're in a Renaissance time, but it seems like we kind of like stepped back here since maybe 2001 to 2020. So I'm envisioning it that the 2020 to 2040 is a renewal of the Renaissance that we started in the 80s and 90s. It's going to come back with the same kind of gusto and enthusiasm and rate of momentum that we had in the 80s, 90s, and it's going to be pretty powerful.
This is amazing. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Explaining. Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you.